The way in which the preaching of Jonah has an effect is a lesson to the Jews who would be reading it, for these were pagans. And the Lord takes this up when he refers to the figure of Jonah and indicates how the hardness of heart of his own listeners contrasts with that of the Ninevites. Much preaching, much teaching will happen over this weekend. Some will be powerful, other bits will be, as it were, inoffensive. But if it is direct, clear, demanding, and in God's name challenging, then one can see the division. One can see how some will actually say yes in their heart and others will not want to hear. And quite often, those who will refuse will be those who are well informed, or so they think. And many go into our assemblies with already a complete quantity of invested truth, the which is going to stay put as it is. And woe betide the preacher who rocks the boat. Is that going to lead to growth? Cancer also works in silence and leads to hardening inside. The humble soul is the quiet soul who does not answer back. Answering back can be purely mental. A humble soul is a grateful soul and takes every morsel of truth with gratitude. It applies on a daily basis. We block out truth by our knowledge of the same. The psalm is acrostic. It's an alphabet of devout prayers. In the Grail version it is singable. These four-liners are beautiful and they can be very much our own prayer and our own hymn. Lord, make me know your ways. Lord, teach me your paths. Make me walk in your truth and teach me, for you are God my Saviour. It's so simple, and yet how few will hear it sung. It'll be rattled off as yet another reading without even a pause between the others and itself. Alas, we have mangled our hymnology, for the Psalms are our primary hymns. The 7th chapter of the first letter to the Corinthians is a gem. To understand it correctly, one needs to collocate it in its context. It is early, and in the early period they are expecting the imminent return of the Lord, parousia. And so there is an urgency. However, it is not enough just to say that and then not go on to the meaning, because the meaning still holds. Is there not still an urgency? We are not here for long in terms of eternity, and so we are urged to make the most of time and therefore not to engage 101% with the material, to use the world without being used by it. And it applies also to the choice of life. If one is aware of the fragility of life and its limitedness, then one will make life choices in accordance with our own truth, that of facing eternity fairly shortly. So in that context, it matters whether we opt to give our energy to raising a family or to preaching the gospel and doing only the Lord's work. These are life choices which actually still apply. And the Church in the West has understood it as still applying. For availability to God is also availability to his people. I remember actually hearing a good lecture by an Anglican abbot, the abbot of Nashdom of the time, who indicated in one paragraph of his talk how celibacy gave a tremendous availability. And he meant by that not just on the vertical, but also on the horizontal. Actually, Protestants are aware of that, because in the Protestant manse or Anglican or nonconformist presbytery, the vicarage, the rectory, there is always an awareness that one is going into what? Someone's family, someone's home. It's not the same. It's complex. The availability of the priest in the Western Rite is a precious gift to humanity. The priest is as available as God the Father, and if he takes away that availability, e.g. by disguising himself, not wearing his clericals, then the Church and mankind are deprived. I have noticed that actually this accessibility to people is linked with one's freedom from not being bound up with one person affectively, and therefore with the consequences, a family. One loves all equally, and one is free for all equally, and one's time belongs to all equally. It's a huge gift for humanity. And would you believe it, it was one of the anti-Catholic people in the 1700s in France. It may have been Jean-Jacques Rousseau who said, as it were secretly admitted, that this actually was true. There's nothing more beautiful than the availability of a Catholic priest. On that level, he recognized the truth. So, this then is a blessing, because engagement on the level of the will, and therefore the time, the heart, the mind, to one person alone is hugely absorbing. And also it takes up much time in one's youth, the choice of a person, and holding up a marriage until death is not easy. Therefore much energy goes in that direction, also much money. But this is a huge freedom, to be free for God and man altogether and equally. Of course, old Nick knows it, so we can expect an onslaught on that one. And this availability comes through in the Lord's call. He calls these people who are fully engaged in their occupation, fishing in this case. These probably were related. We have Simon, then to be called Peter, and Andrew, brothers, involved in the fishing business, and we have these other two brothers, James and John. It would seem that they were probably cousins of each other, that is, the first lot and the second lot. And it makes sense. People marry in the area. And the way in which they immediately leave all is interesting. There must have been a huge magnetic effect coming from the Lord. And that too actually can happen. If one looks around the Christian world, one does notice that people who have a warmth about them, a goodness, and also precisely an availability and freedom to give time to others and to follow them through, do attract. And communities which have someone like that in a central position tend to flourish. They draw people and keep people. And the community as such also can be the same. It can draw and attract. Joy and warmth, love and indeed affection do draw and keep. I remember actually how way back in 1974 and then through that period, I was aware of a bonding that could take place with a good community. And when things didn't work out after many years there with the Carthusians at Célignac, partly because of the writing of poetry, the instinct straight away was to go back to La Trappe that I'd known since I was 20. And the instinct is linked with the fact that memories and affections are linked up with a place. And that place in itself talks. There is a homecoming. Even odours and smells are familiar and bring back instantly the past. and faces too go on, and a shared history, shared hours, shared graces of vocation, shared letters when one is away in the meantime, for instance in student days, all make up an irreplaceable bonding. It's different from the case of a person who comes from the moon and enters a community in midlife. Those bonding memories are not there, and this matters. I just conclude. When doing the research in Rome on a medieval abbot, Adam Scott, who was a Premonstratensian who fled, as it were, and became a Carthusian, I came across one part of his writings which is very poignant. It's the dialogue between the soul and the reason, the soliloquy. And in it, one detects that he's actually arguing within his own mind, on the page, his own dramatic inner thought at that point, because he wants to become a Carthusian and flee, but he's abbot. And the various ways in which his mind, his reason, is arguing that he should stay put and yet wants to go are interesting. The vows and so on, he quotes the importance of the vows. Make your vows to the Lord and keep them. And then, as it were, the crunch, the big one that actually hurts a lot, the memories. And he goes into very poignant language on the way in which this was the place of grace and love in youth. Wow! The common experience of mankind. And it's true also in marriage. One can't come from the moon and find someone else in the same way as one has grown into a person in one's youth and shared one's first love. All this shopping around from partner to partner is something which shatters the will and memory in a way it was never meant for. We're meant to be at home in one person, one community, one history. We are not divided, and we're not meant to be.